Michael Williams was a man who lived in the world of business more than in the world of home. At 42, he was the head of one of the biggest companies in New York. His name was printed in newspapers. His face appeared in magazines, and people whispered about his success in the halls of his tall office tower. To most people, Michael seemed untouchable, a man who had everything: money, power, respect. But those who looked closely knew he carried something else too: loneliness. Michael had grown up in a small town in Ohio. His parents worked hard, his father in a factory and his mother as a school teacher. They had given him values of discipline and effort, but they had also taught him to dream big. Michael studied hard, went to college, and built his empire brick by brick. He had achieved more than his parents could have imagined, yet sometimes he wondered if, in chasing everything, he had left behind something important. Most evenings, Michael stayed late at the office. The glass tower that bore his company's name often kept its lights on until midnight because of him. He was usually the last one to leave, his expensive suit slightly wrinkled, his tie pulled loose, and his briefcase heavy with documents. His home was more like a hotel room, a place to rest before another day began. But on that particular Friday evening, something unusual stirred in Michael's heart. The week had been long: board meetings, investor calls, and endless decisions. His assistant, Jennifer, had urged him to take a break, but he had refused at first. Now, however, as he looked out from his office window at the golden sunset over the city, he felt a sudden pull. He wanted to go home. He wanted peace. "Cancel the dinner meeting," he told Jennifer in his deep, firm voice. She looked at him with surprise. "Are you sure, Mr. Williams?" "Yes," Michael said simply. "I'll head home early tonight." It was rare. So rare that even his driver, Robert, raised his eyebrows when Michael stepped into the car 2 hours earlier than usual. The ride back was quiet. The city lights flickered as the car moved through traffic, and Michael leaned back, loosening his tie, feeling the kind of tiredness that wasn't just from work. It was the tiredness of someone who wanted a reason to feel human again. When they reached his penthouse, Robert opened the door. "Have a good night, sir," Michael nodded, stepping out. The tall building stood above the city, its glass windows reflecting the fading light. Inside, the lobby greeted him with polished floors and quiet air. He walked past the staff, who greeted him politely, and entered the private elevator that took him directly to his apartment. The doors opened to the silence of his spacious home. Normally, his chef would have been in the kitchen preparing a healthy meal, but tonight there was no sign of him. The air was not silent, it carried faint sounds. A soft clatter, the sound of dishes. Michael frowned. Who could it be? He had not called anyone. His steps were slow but steady as he walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. The sound grew clearer. Someone was there. As he reached the doorway, Michael's sharp eyes caught sight of a figure standing by the counter. His first thought was that it must be his chef, but then the truth made his heart skip. It wasn't the chef. It wasn't a family member. It was Sarah Miller. Sarah was one of the janitors at his company. Michael had seen her a few times, usually when he left late and the cleaning crew started their work. She was quiet, polite, and never spoke much. Her uniform was always neat, though faded from years of washing, and her brown hair was usually tied back in a simple ponytail. Michael had never thought much about her. She was part of the background of his office life. But now, she was standing in his penthouse kitchen, in the middle of his private space, where no one from his office had ever stepped. Michael froze, his mind filled with questions. How had she entered? Why was she here? What was she doing in his kitchen? Sarah noticed him at that moment. Her eyes widened and her face turned pale. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Mr. Williams," Sarah whispered, her voice shaky. Michael's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" His tone was calm but sharp, like the edge of a blade. Sarah looked down at the floor, her hands shifting nervously behind her back. She was hiding something. "What's in your hands?" Michael asked firmly. Her grip tightened on whatever she held. Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She looked as if she wanted to explain, but fear held her tongue. Michael stepped closer, his tall frame casting a shadow across the counter. "I will ask you once more," he said slowly. "What are you hiding?" Sarah's breathing quickened. Her shoulders shook as if she were carrying a heavy burden. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think, sir," she said. "Please, just give me a moment to explain." But Michael did not move. His eyes were fixed on her, on the secret she was keeping in his kitchen. The woman who cleaned his office floors at night was now standing in his home, clutching something like it was the most important thing in the world. And in that moment, Michael realized his life, so controlled, so predictable, was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. Michael's eyes stayed locked on Sarah. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, and the ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly felt louder than it should. The billionaire, who had faced countless tough meetings, investor demands, and boardroom wars, now found himself frozen in his own kitchen, by a janitor holding something she refused to show. Sarah's hands were trembling. Her back was slightly turned, her arms folded awkwardly as if she was shielding something delicate. Her face was pale and her lips pressed tight together. "Sarah," Michael said slowly, his voice deep but calm, "you're in my home. That alone needs an answer. Now tell me, what are you hiding?" She glanced up at him, her eyes full of fear. Then finally she drew her hands forward. In them was not money, not jewelry, not anything Michael might have expected. Instead, she held a small paper bag, worn and crumpled, with a faint smell rising from it. Michael frowned as he recognized it. It was food. Inside were sandwiches wrapped in napkins, and next to them a little carton of milk. Confusion swept across his face. "You broke into my home. For food?" Sarah shook her head quickly. No, I didn't break in. The door downstairs was open when I came to clean one of the service halls. I wasn't supposed to be here, I know. But She stopped, her throat tightening. Michael's expression hardened. "You what?" Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She clutched the bag tighter as though it held her last piece of hope. "I didn't come for me. I came because my daughter was hungry." The words hung in the air like a weight. Michael blinked. He hadn't expected that. "Your daughter?" Sarah nodded, her voice breaking. "Her name is Emily. She's 7. I couldn't afford groceries this week. I thought maybe the chef had left something here, something I could take without anyone noticing. I didn't mean harm, sir. I didn't know what else to do." Michael, who had spent years calculating profits, mergers, and investments worth billions, suddenly felt his chest tighten. This was not a business problem. This was life, raw and unpolished. A mother desperate to feed her child had walked into the home of a man who never worried about food. A man who could buy an entire store without thinking twice. For a moment, Michael didn't speak. His eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained steady. "You should have asked for help, Sarah. Why would you risk your job, your dignity, by sneaking into my home?" Sarah's shoulders sagged. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Because people like me don't get to ask people like you for help. No one listens. No one believes we deserve it. I've worked in your building for 3 years, Mr. Williams, cleaning floors no one notices. I've seen the way people look through me like I'm invisible. Do you think anyone would believe me if I said I needed food from your kitchen?" Her words struck Michael deeper than he expected. He had always believed he treated his staff fairly, but he also realized he had never truly noticed Sarah, or others like her. They were part of the building, part of the background. But now, standing in front of him, Sarah was no longer invisible. Michael exhaled slowly, leaning against the counter. "Where is your daughter now?" he asked. "At home," Sarah replied quickly. "She's waiting for me. I promised her I'd bring something. She hasn't eaten since morning." The thought of a hungry child waiting at home made Michael's chest ache. For all his wealth, for all his success, he couldn't imagine the pain of looking into a child's eyes and having nothing to give. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Michael asked again, his tone softer now. Sarah's tears slipped down her cheeks. "Because I didn't want pity. I just wanted to survive one more night. Tomorrow, maybe I'd find a way. But tonight, Emily needed food." The room was quiet again. Michael looked at the paper bag in her hands, the sandwiches wrapped so neatly as if they were treasures, and something inside him shifted. He had spent years building walls around his life. No one came close unless he allowed it. He lived in glass towers, rode in black cars, and dined in rooms filled with polished silverware. Yet here in his kitchen, a janitor had cracked those walls, not with power or ambition, but with desperation and truth. Michael finally spoke. "Put the bag down," Sarah froze. "Please, sir, it's all I have for her. I didn't say I'd take it away. Michael interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. Put it down. You won't be needing that old food. Confused, Sarah set the bag carefully on the counter. Michael walked past her, opened his refrigerator and began pulling out fresh food. Containers of pasta, grilled chicken, vegetables, and bottles of juice. He placed them in a larger bag, filling it until it could hardly close. Sarah's eyes widened. Mr. Williams, you said she's 7? Michael asked without looking at her. Yes, Sarah whispered. He packed an extra carton of milk and some fruit, then finally closed the bag. When he turned back, he handed it to her. Take this home to Emily, and next time you come to me directly. You don't need to sneak into anyone's kitchen. Do you understand? Sarah's hand shook as she took the heavy bag. Her lips quivered, but no words came at first. She finally managed to whisper, Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. Michael looked at her quietly. Say you'll be honest. If you need help, ask for it. Don't hide. Not from me. Her tears flowed freely now, but there was relief in them. She nodded quickly, clutching the bag as if it carried hope itself. For Michael, it was a strange feeling. In his office, victories came from numbers, contracts, and deals. But tonight, standing in his kitchen with a janitor whose world was so far from his, he felt a different kind of victory. The victory of seeing someone, truly seeing them, and giving them back a piece of dignity. As Sarah turned to leave, Michael stopped her with one last question. Sarah, he said, his voice thoughtful, why didn't you tell me before that you had a daughter? She paused at the doorway, looking back at him with tired but honest eyes. Because I didn't think you'd care. Then she left, the bag of food pressed against her chest. Michael stood alone in the kitchen, her words echoing in his mind. And for the first time in years, the billionaire CEO realized he cared. Michael Williams spent the rest of the evening walking through his apartment, but his mind was not in the walls of his penthouse. It was with Sarah Miller, the janitor who had stood in his kitchen holding a crumpled paper bag, and with the 7-year-old daughter she had spoken of, Emily. He sat in his study, papers spread across his desk, but his eyes did not focus on them. For the first time in years, he was distracted, not by numbers or deadlines, but by a simple image. A little girl waiting at home, hungry, while her mother begged silently for help. It unsettled him. Michael was a man who prided himself on control. Every detail of his company was measured, every risk calculated. Yet what had just happened felt outside of his control, outside of the world he had built for himself, and still, it mattered to him. Meanwhile, Sarah walked quickly down the quiet streets of Brooklyn, clutching the heavy bag Michael had given her. Her small apartment was just a few blocks from the subway station. The bag dug into her arm, but she didn't care. Each step brought her closer to Emily, and closer to the moment when her little girl would smile again. As she unlocked the door to their apartment, the dim hallway light flickered above her. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was small, barely 2 rooms. The walls carried cracks and the furniture was old, but Sarah had kept it clean and neat. On a worn couch sat Emily, her dark brown hair falling over her face as she looked up with hopeful eyes. Mom? Emily asked softly, her voice carrying the hunger of a child who had waited too long. Sarah set the bag on the small wooden table and knelt beside her daughter. I brought food, sweetheart, she whispered, brushing her hand gently over Emily's cheek. The little girl's eyes widened when Sarah opened the bag. The smell of real food, fresh pasta, chicken, fruit filled the room. Emily gasped in delight. Mom, this is like a feast. Sarah laughed through her tears. Yes, baby. Tonight you eat well. Emily climbed onto the chair eagerly and Sarah served her from the containers. The little girl's small hands held the fork tightly, and she began eating with the joy of someone who had been given a treasure. Sarah watched, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. For a few moments, the only sound in the apartment was Emily's happy chewing. Then between bites, Emily looked up. Where did you get all this food, Mom? Sarah hesitated. She wanted to protect her daughter from the truth, from the shame of her actions. But Emily's eyes were so honest, so full of trust that Sarah couldn't lie. It was Mr. Williams, she said softly. Emily blinked. Mr. Williams? The boss from your building? Sarah nodded. Yes, sweetheart, he saw me in his kitchen. I was afraid he'd be angry, but instead he gave this to us. Emily's fork stopped midway to her mouth. The big boss gave this? Really? Sarah smiled faintly. Yes, he told me we don't have to hide. He told me I could ask for help. Emily thought about that for a moment, then smiled shyly. He sounds kind. Sarah's eyes grew misty. Yes, baby. He was kind tonight. She didn't tell Emily the whole story. The fear she felt when Michael caught her, the shame of standing in his penthouse, the weight of years of being invisible. She only wanted her daughter to remember the kindness, not the struggle. Back in his penthouse, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat by the wide glass window, looking at the city lights below. His heart felt heavy. Why did this bother him so much? He had donated millions to charities before. His company had social programs. Yet helping Sarah felt different. This was not a faceless donation or a tax write-off. This was real. This was a mother with a child. The next morning, as Michael walked into his office, he noticed Sarah in the distance. She was in her uniform again, mop in hand, quietly cleaning the corner of the hallway. She didn't look up when he passed, but he could feel the weight of unspoken words between them. For the first time, Michael stopped. "Good morning, Sarah," he said. She froze, surprised. Slowly, she lifted her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Williams." Michael studied her face. There was tiredness in her eyes, but also strength. "How is Emily?" he asked. Sarah's lips parted slightly, shock flashing in her expression. No one at her job had ever cared enough to ask her about her life outside the mop and bucket. She swallowed hard. "She's better, sir. She had a real meal last night." Michael gave a small nod. "Good." And then he walked on, leaving Sarah standing still, her hands gripping the mop tighter, her heart pounding from the simple fact that he remembered her daughter's name. That evening, Michael found himself restless again. He thought about Emily, about the way Sarah had spoken of her with trembling pride. A thought grew in his mind, one that wouldn't let him go. The next day, he asked his assistant Jennifer to clear his evening schedule. "I need to make a personal stop," he said. Hours later, Michael's sleek black car pulled up in front of Sarah's apartment building. He stepped out, his tall frame standing awkwardly in the worn-down neighborhood. The smell of street food and the sound of children playing filled the air. For a man used to boardrooms and luxury hotels, this place felt like another world. He climbed the narrow stairs and knocked on Sarah's door. Inside, Sarah nearly dropped the dish she was washing when she heard the knock. Emily ran to the door, curious. Sarah quickly dried her hands and opened it, only to gasp. "Mr. Williams," she whispered. Michael stood there holding a simple paper bag in his hand. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said quietly. Sarah blinked, stunned. No, please come in." He stepped into the small apartment. Emily peeked from behind her mother's leg, her big brown eyes full of curiosity. Michael crouched slightly, smiling at her. "You must be Emily." The little girl nodded shyly. "Yes, I'm Michael," he said gently. "I brought something for you." He handed her the paper bag, and Emily's eyes lit up when she opened it. Inside were books, crayons, and a box of cookies. Her smile was brighter than any boardroom victory Michael had ever had. "Thank you," she said, hugging the bag tightly. Michael felt something stir deep inside him. That smile, innocent and grateful, touched a part of him that his wealth had never reached. Sarah stood nearby, overwhelmed. "Mr. Williams, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," Michael said simply. "No child should go hungry, Sarah. And no mother should feel she has to steal to provide. You work hard. You deserve better." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She looked at him, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" Michael paused. The answer wasn't clear even to him, but he spoke from the truth he felt. "Because for the first time in years," he said softly, "I realized I care." The room fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was warm. Emily giggled as she flipped through her new books, and Sarah wiped her tears, her heart full of gratitude and confusion at the same time. And Michael Williams, the billionaire who had always lived in the clouds of success, sat down in a small apartment in Brooklyn and felt more human than he had in a very long time. Michael Williams had spent his whole life building a reputation of power. He was the man who made impossible deals possible. People listened when he spoke. They respected him, even feared him. But now, as he sat in Sarah Miller's small apartment with a paper bag of books and cookies opened on the table, he realized something important. He was not the same man when he looked into the eyes of a little girl named Emily. Her innocent smile made the world feel different. It wasn't about contracts, meetings, or numbers. It was about something simpler, something purer. Michael had almost forgotten what that felt like. Emily held up one of the books he had brought. "Will you read this with me?" she asked shyly. Sarah's eyes widened. "Emily, don't trouble Mr. Williams." But Michael raised a hand gently. "It's no trouble." He leaned forward, took the book, and began reading aloud. His deep voice filled the small room, and Emily sat close, listening with full attention. Sarah watched silently from the kitchen, her heart caught between gratitude and disbelief. This was her boss, the man who owned one of the biggest companies in New York, sitting in her modest home reading to her daughter like a father would. The clock ticked by, but Michael didn't seem to notice. He turned each page slowly, sometimes pausing to ask Emily questions about the pictures. She giggled, answering with excitement. For Sarah, it was a scene she hadn't seen in years, a man giving Emily the attention and care she deserved. When the story ended, Emily clapped her hands happily. "That was fun. Can we read another one?" Michael chuckled softly. "Next time," he promised. Sarah cleared her throat gently. "Emily, why don't you go wash up before bed?" The little girl nodded, hugging the book tightly before disappearing into the bathroom. Now the apartment grew quiet. Sarah turned toward Michael, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "Mr. Williams, I don't know how to thank you. You've already done so much." Emily hasn't smiled like that in months. Michael leaned back slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "You don't need to thank me. I only did what any person should do." Sarah shook her head. "No, not everyone would. People walk past us every day. They see I'm just a janitor and they look the other way. But you stopped. You noticed." Her voice broke slightly and she quickly wiped her eyes. "I've been doing everything I can to give Emily a good life, but it's hard. Rent, food, school, it never feels like enough. I was so ashamed when you saw me in your kitchen, but at the same time, I was desperate. I would have done anything that night." Michael listened carefully. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking of what to say next in a negotiation. He was simply listening to a woman who had been invisible to him until now. "You're strong, Sarah," he said quietly. "Stronger than most people I know. You're doing everything for your daughter, and that takes courage." Sarah looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Courage doesn't feed her stomach, Mr. Williams. Courage doesn't pay the bills." Michael was silent. She was right. For all the inspiring words, real life was harder. Finally, he spoke again. "Then let me help. Not as your boss, but as someone who cares." Sarah's heart skipped. She shook her head quickly. "I can't accept more. You've already given us enough." "People will talk. They'll say things about me, about why the CEO cares about a janitor." Michael's gaze was steady. "Let them talk. What matters is Emily. If she has food, books, and a chance at a better future, then nothing else matters." For a moment, silence filled the room again. Sarah's heart was torn. She wanted to accept his help, but pride and fear held her back. She had lived too long believing she had to survive alone. Before she could reply, Emily ran back into the room, holding her pajamas in her arms. "Can Mr. Williams come again tomorrow?" she asked with a bright smile. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. Michael, however, smiled warmly. "If your mom agrees, I'll visit again." Emily clapped her hands. "Yes." She rushed to hug Sarah tightly before running off to her small bedroom. The warmth in the room lingered, and Michael stood slowly. "I should go. It's late." Sarah walked him to the door, her voice still unsure. "Mr. Williams, thank you, not just for the food or the books, for treating us like we matter." Michael paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. "You do matter, Sarah, both of you. Don't ever think otherwise." And with that, he stepped into the night. The following week, Michael found himself thinking about Sarah and Emily more often than he expected. During board meetings, while presentations played on the screen, his mind wandered to the little apartment in Brooklyn. In the evenings, when he looked out from his penthouse window at the glittering skyline, he thought of Emily's smile, so much brighter than the city lights below. It was strange, almost unsettling, but he didn't fight it. For once, Michael felt that caring about something outside his empire didn't weaken him. It gave him strength. On Friday evening, he visited again. Sarah looked surprised but welcomed him in. This time he brought groceries neatly packed in bags. Emily rushed to the door, hugging his legs before pulling him inside. The evening passed with laughter and stories. Michael even helped Emily with her homework, sitting at the small table while Sarah cooked. For Michael, it was a simple dinner. Nothing compared to the meals his chef usually prepared, but it tasted better than anything he had eaten in years. Sarah noticed the way Emily's eyes shone whenever Michael was around. She noticed the way her daughter laughed freely, something she rarely did before. And though fear still lingered in her heart, Sarah couldn't deny the truth. Michael had already made a place in their lives. One night, after another visit, as Michael prepared to leave, Emily hugged him tightly. "You're like family now," she whispered. Michael's chest tightened. He wasn't used to words like that. Family had been a distant thought for him for years. Yet in that moment, he felt something stir, a longing he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Sarah saw the look in his eyes and felt her own heart ache. She knew this was more than kindness now. Something was growing between them, something she couldn't name, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. As the door closed behind him, Sarah leaned against the wall, whispering to herself, "What are you doing, Michael Williams?" And what are you doing, Sarah Miller? For the billionaire CEO and the janitor, the lines of their worlds had begun to blur, and though neither fully understood what was happening, both knew one thing: life would never be the same again. Michael Williams had always lived in a world of glass towers and polished suits. His calendar was packed with business meetings, charity galas, and private dinners with other powerful people. Every move he made was reported in newspapers. Every decision he took was analyzed by experts. He was used to being watched, but he was never used to being questioned. But now, as he continued to visit Sarah Miller and her daughter Emily, questions began to rise. Inside him, and soon outside too. At first no one noticed. His driver, Robert, only raised his brows slightly when Michael asked to be dropped off in Brooklyn again. His assistant, Jennifer, cleared his evening schedules without asking too many questions. But whispers began to form. People wondered why the CEO, who usually spent his evenings at exclusive events, was going somewhere unknown. Michael didn't care. For him, the quiet dinners in Sarah's small apartment felt more real than any ballroom filled with chandeliers. Emily's laughter was brighter than the applause at his speeches. And Sarah's tired but warm smile meant more to him than the polite compliments of investors. One evening, after finishing another long day at the office, Michael stepped into the elevator and saw Sarah cleaning the floor near the lobby. Their eyes met briefly. Sarah lowered her gaze quickly, but not before he noticed the faint smile tugging at her lips. As the elevator doors closed, Michael felt a strange warmth in his chest. He realized that seeing her there, even in her simple uniform, mattered to him more than he expected. Later that night at Sarah's apartment, Emily was showing him her drawings. "Look, Mr. Williams," she said proudly, holding up a paper filled with bright colors. "This is you, me, and Mom at the park." Michael studied the childish drawing. There he was, drawn tall with a big smile. Next to him, Sarah and Emily stood hand in hand. The little family picture made his throat tighten. Sarah glanced at it too, her face turning pink. "Emily, you shouldn't bother Mr. Williams with your drawings," but Michael shook his head. "It's not a bother. It's the best gift I've received in years." Emily beamed and rushed to tape the drawing on the wall above her bed. Yet outside their small world, questions grew louder. At a charity dinner the next week, Michael noticed several people whispering when he arrived. His business partner, Robert Harris, leaned in during dinner and said in a low voice, "Michael, you've been different lately. Missing meetings, skipping events. Rumor is you've been spending time in some neighborhood far from here. What's going on?" Michael sipped his wine calmly. "Since when do my evenings concern the board?" Robert raised his brows. "When your reputation is involved, everything concerns the board. You know how this works. People are asking questions." Michael set his glass down firmly. "Let them ask. I don't owe anyone an explanation for how I spend my time." But inside he knew Robert was right about one thing. His world was noticing. And his world did not forgive easily. The next evening, when Michael visited Sarah again, he seemed quieter. Sarah noticed immediately. "Something's wrong," she said softly, as they sat at the small kitchen table. Michael looked at her carefully. "People are talking. They want to know why I come here. They don't understand." Sarah's hands stilled on the tablecloth. Her heart tightened. "Mr. Williams, maybe it's better if you don't come anymore." The words pierced Michael like a blade. "Is that what you want?" Sarah shook her head quickly. "No, but I don't want to ruin your name. People like you can't be seen with people like me. A janitor from Brooklyn. They won't understand. They'll laugh. They'll judge." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady. "Do you think I care what they say? Sarah, I face competitors trying to destroy me. I face shareholders questioning my decisions. But this," he pointed gently toward the small bedroom where Emily's laughter echoed, "this matters more than all of that." Sarah's eyes grew misty. Why us?" Michael's answer was simple, but his tone carried the weight of truth. "Because you remind me of what's real. You and Emily. You make me feel human again." Her heart ached at his words. She looked away, afraid of the feelings rising in her chest. Days turned into weeks, and Michael's visits continued. He helped Emily with schoolwork, sometimes took her to the park, and even fixed the broken leg of their small dining chair one evening. Sarah began to see a side of him no magazine ever captured, but the outside world was no longer whispering. It was asking loudly. One morning, Sarah walked into the office building for her shift and felt the stares. 2 other employees whispered near the elevators. She caught fragments of their words. "The CEO and the janitor. Can you believe it? She's probably using him." Sarah's cheeks burned. She lowered her head and hurried to her duties. By evening, she couldn't stop worrying. When Michael arrived at her apartment, she finally spoke, her voice trembling. "They're talking about us at work, about me, about you." Michael looked at her seriously. "And what do you want me to do?" Tears filled her eyes. Maybe stop coming, for Emily's sake. I don't want her to be laughed at. I don't want her to grow up hearing whispers about her mother." Michael was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke firmly. "Sarah, people will always talk, but Emily deserves a future where she doesn't have to hide who she is or where she comes from. And you deserve respect, not shame. If the world can't see that, then the world is wrong, not us." Sarah's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but fear still gripped her. The turning point came a week later. Michael invited Sarah and Emily to an art fair downtown. At first, Sarah refused, but Emily's excitement convinced her. They went together, walking through rows of paintings and sculptures. For Emily, it was a wonderland. For Sarah, it was terrifying. She felt out of place among the wealthy crowd. But Michael stayed by her side the entire time, introducing them proudly to people he knew. "This is Sarah," he said simply. "And this is Emily." Some people raised brows. Some whispered. But Michael didn't waver. He carried himself with the same confidence he used in boardrooms, and his quiet strength shielded them. At one point, Emily tugged his hand and whispered, "Thank you for not hiding us." Michael looked down at her, his heart tightening. "Never, Emily, I'll never hide you." That night, as Michael dropped them home, Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why are you risking so much? Your image, your reputation, everything." Michael smiled faintly, though his eyes carried deep truth. "Because for once, Sarah, I'm not thinking about my image. I'm thinking about what matters most. And right now, that's you and Emily." Her breath caught. The walls she had built for years, walls of pride, fear, and survival, began to crack. As he left, Sarah closed the door behind him and leaned against it, whispering to herself, "He means it. He really means it." For the first time in years, Michael Williams, the billionaire CEO, was not afraid of the whispers. Because he had found something more powerful than reputation, he had found a reason to care, and he wasn't ready to let it go. The weeks had passed quietly, yet uneasily, for Michael Williams. He had grown accustomed to his visits to Sarah and Emily's apartment, to seeing the little girl's laughter, and to feeling a warmth he had never allowed himself to feel in his glass towers and boardrooms. But now whispers and rumors had grown louder. The media, always hungry for stories about billionaires, had begun speculating about his sudden absences from events and meetings. Michael knew the world he had built, the empire he had carefully maintained, would not easily accept the connection he had formed with a janitor and her young daughter. He felt torn between 2 worlds, the life of wealth, fame and power, and the life of simple truth, kindness, and family. That Friday evening, he sat in his penthouse, staring out at the glittering New York skyline. His phone buzzed repeatedly, investors, assistants, friends. Every message reminded him of the world waiting for him. Yet his mind wandered to Brooklyn, to a small apartment, to Emily's eager smile, and to Sarah's tired but warm eyes. A deep sigh escaped him. He realized that no amount of money or recognition could replace the feeling he had found in their presence. He had a choice to make: continue his life of appearances or step into a world that mattered in ways his empire never could measure. Meanwhile, Sarah and Emily were preparing dinner. Emily hummed a cheerful tune, holding a small wooden spoon like a microphone while Sarah stirred the pasta sauce. But Sarah's mind was elsewhere. She had noticed Michael's absence over the past 2 days, and unease had filled her heart. She worried about the media, about the gossip that might reach their building, and about the life they were slowly building together. Emily glanced at her mother, sensing her worry. "Mom, is Mr. Williams coming tonight?" Sarah hesitated, biting her lip. "I don't know, sweetheart. He's very busy," Emily frowned. "But I want to see him. I like when he's here. He makes me laugh." Sarah smiled softly, brushing Emily's hair behind her ear. "I know, baby. I know." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Emily ran to open the door, and her face lit up when she saw Michael standing there, a small bag in his hand and a tired but determined look on his face. "Emily," he greeted warmly. "Mr. Williams," she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. Sarah stood behind her daughter, her heart pounding. "Michael, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. Michael met her gaze steadily. "I came to choose what matters most." Sarah's eyes widened, sensing the seriousness in his words. He stepped inside, carrying the small bag. "I brought something for dinner and—" He paused, looking at both of them. "And I brought myself to stay. Not just tonight, but as long as you'll allow me." Sarah blinked, her heart racing. Michael held up a hand gently. "Before you speak, let me say this. I know what people will think. My board, the media, the city, they will question everything. They may even criticize me. But I've realized that the life I have built without caring, without love, is empty. You and Emily, you've given me something I never expected, and I cannot ignore it. Not anymore." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She took a deep breath. "Michael, that's a big step. It's not just about us. Your world. It's complicated. I don't want to make things harder for you." Michael shook his head firmly. "No, Sarah, the complicated world is waiting anyway. But this is real. This is my choice. I choose both of you over appearances, over gossip, over fear. I choose heart over everything else." Sarah's lips trembled. She looked at Emily, who was smiling, sensing the happiness radiating from her mother. Finally, Sarah spoke softly. "If you truly mean that, then welcome. But understand it won't be easy." Michael nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I understand, and I'm ready." That night they cooked together. Emily laughed as Michael tried to flip a pancake and failed spectacularly. Sarah couldn't help but smile, watching the man who controlled an empire stumble over a frying pan. It was perfect in its imperfection, and for once Michael didn't care about being perfect. He only cared about being present. After dinner, they sat together, talking, sharing stories, and laughing in a way Sarah had almost forgotten existed. Michael listened to Emily's stories from school, her dreams of becoming a painter and her small complaints about homework. He shared stories from his childhood, stories he had never told anyone in the world, stories of fears, dreams, and moments of loneliness. For the first time in years, Michael felt truly connected. He realized that the life of wealth, while grand, had left him starved for something far more valuable: love, trust, and family. The following weeks were not without challenges. Whispers at Michael's company grew louder. Some of his board members expressed concern over his changing priorities. The media caught wind of his visits, leading to speculation. But Michael stood firm. He refused to hide, refused to apologize, and refused to retreat. Sarah noticed the courage it took him to do so. Each time she saw him return, even after a long day at the office, she realized the depth of his commitment. He wasn't just visiting. They were becoming a part of his life. One afternoon, as Sarah and Michael walked in the park with Emily, a reporter from a local magazine approached. She asked questions, some polite, some probing. Michael didn't flinch. He answered honestly, speaking about his visits, about caring for Sarah and Emily, and about what truly mattered to him. The reporter's notebook filled quickly. But Michael smiled quietly, holding Emily's hand and glancing at Sarah. For the first time, he felt no fear of judgment. Evening fell, and the three of them sat on a small bench by the fountain. Emily's laughter echoed across the park as she chased pigeons, Sarah leaning against Michael as they watched their daughter play. Michael turned to Sarah. "I know it won't be easy. People will talk and our lives will be complicated. But I promise you this, we face it together. You and Emily are my family now. Nothing else matters more." Sarah took his hand, her heart full. "And you are ours, Michael. Don't ever doubt that." Emily ran back to them, her arms wide. "Can we go home now? I want to draw more pictures for you." Michael laughed, lifting her into his arms. "Lead the way, little artist." As they walked back to their apartment, the city lights sparkled around them. For the first time, Michael felt at peace. The empire, the fame, and the fortune were all part of his world, but now there was something irreplaceable waiting for him in the small apartment in Brooklyn. Love, family, and a life he had chosen to live fully. That night, as they settled in their small living room, Emily asleep on the couch with her new books scattered around, Sarah sat beside Michael. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and a deep sense of trust. "You really mean it, don't you?" she whispered. Michael held her hand gently. "Yes, I've spent so long building walls around myself, Sarah, but you and Emily, you've broken them down. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I choose us. I choose this life, messy and real, over everything else." Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks, not of sorrow, but of relief and happiness. "Then let's face it together. Whatever comes, we face it together." Michael nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time, he was not alone. Not just physically, but emotionally. He had found a world worth living for, a world of laughter, love, and genuine connection. And as he looked around the modest apartment, seeing Emily's little toys and drawings, seeing Sarah's warm smile, he realized that sometimes the richest lives were not the ones filled with money or power. They were the ones filled with heart. The billionaire CEO had come home early, expecting peace, but he had found something far greater. He had found a family, a love that could not be measured by wealth or status, and a life worth living fully. Michael Williams smiled softly, feeling the warmth in his chest. For the first time, he knew that the truest fortune in the world was right here, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, with a mother and daughter who had taught him the meaning of care, courage, and heart. And in that moment, he was truly home.